Welcome to Dominion Ministries. I'm Ben. Thanks for joining me today. In 1 Kings 13, it's a story of a young prophet, and he goes and prophesies against Samaria at the altar at Bethel, and calls down judgment, and the altar like splits in half. It's this really supernatural moment. And the Lord had told him, don't return back the way you came, and do not stop while you're there. Don't eat, just get going. Well, this old prophet, this old backslidden prophet, hears about what happened, and he chases down the young man and finds him, and he's like, listen, come back and eat with me. I want to talk to you. He's like, no, the Lord has given me clear instructions. I'm not to return home the way I came. I'm not to stop and eat anything until I'm gone, until I get back home. And this old prophet's like, well, the Lord told me that you should stop and have dinner with me. And so the young man, like, oh, okay. So he goes back and eats with the old prophet, and the old prophet, the Spirit of the Lord comes on him, and he prophesies that this young man is going to die because he disobeyed God. And there are times in life when you can make decisions that have unalterable consequences. We see that even in our culture right now with the whole transgender thing and putting kids on puberty blockers and mutilating their bodies. There's unalterable consequences for this. And that's that way in life, is there's unalterable consequences sometimes for what we do. Some mistakes you can recover from pretty quickly without, a lot of trouble. Some mistakes take a long time to recover from, and it comes at a high cost. A young girl, high school girl gets pregnant, and she raises that kid, and she's working like a dog, just crazy and putting in the time and the effort, and it's a tough go. And as she gets older, after a lot of time and effort and labor, and, things finally turn around for her. And sometimes you can make a mistake that costs you. It costs you permanently. And it's the importance of staying obedient and staying consistent. I know where I'm headed in life. My wife and I know God has called us into ministry. There are specific things that He's speaking to us about doing. We are making decisions to get us that direction. There's no me quitting ministry and getting a factory job somewhere, right? Go work for some company and make more money. That's not even on the table. That's not even a question. That's not up for discussion. God has spoken so clearly to us, clearly to me as a younger man. Then as we got married, I'm like, listen, this is where I'm going. This is where my life is headed. And if you want to be a part of that with me, let's do that. If not, then now is the time to make that decision and discussion. Not after we get married and you decide you don't like ministry anymore. Well, that's now is the time to decide to get out. We know where we're going in life and what God has spoken to us. There's specific things that God has spoken to me. I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. Or if you will do these things, then I will do these things for you. There's some really specific things, and it requires obedience, discipline, and consistency. There's a lot of things that will come along to pull you away from the Lord. There's a lot of things that will come along that seem good that will pull you out of obedience. It is not sin to eat dinner. It's not a sin to eat dinner with some old minister. It is a sin to sit down and do that if God told you not to do that, right? If you know God has given you clear instructions about your life, if you know from His Word what He expects of you, and then specifically how that applies into your life and where God is leading you, what the Spirit is speaking to you, to do something outside of that is dangerous. And I really want to challenge you today. I really want to encourage you today. Stay obedient, stay consistent, stay focused on where God is leading you. where your life is going. I've counseled so many people, especially wives over 20-some years of ministry, who got hooked up with the wrong guy, and they're faithful to their husband, and they're staying, I'm not talking about they're being physically abused and their husband's cheating on them, but they got hooked up with a guy who's just not really that excited about the Lord, doesn't want to go to church, and they weren't either. But then when they had run from God, they ended up getting married. They got saved a little later on, and their husband was like, what in the world is wrong with this woman? Right? And so, young people, it is important that you stay consistent in God, that you walk obedient to the Lord, because you will make decisions that will alter the course of your life and will have lifelong consequences. Yes, God is a redeemer. Yes, God can change things. And I've seen him do it. And I've seen the mercy of God and the power of God. But that comes with a lot of heartache. It comes, after fasting and praying and seeking God. It's so, right, as I've heard it said, the devil is a terrible taskmaster. The devil is not your friend. He's a terrible life coach. Jesus said, the Lord said that my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus said that, right? Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I'm meek and lowly, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And it's way easier to serve God consistently throughout your life than to not. Right? You don't have to worry about divorce court. You don't have to worry about getting a DUI. You don't have to worry about overdosing. You don't have to worry about getting pregnant out of wedlock and wondering if the guy's going to abandon you. You don't marry some knucklehead. And guys too, you're consistent and you're faithful to your wife and you love your kids and you're working hard and you're being obedient to God. It's so much simpler to start off now in your life when you're young. Young people, if you're watching this, parents, make your kids watch this. It's so much easier to start now and walking in obedience to God than to look back with regret. I had times when I ran away from God that I wanted to do my own thing. Those seasons were very short-lived. There were several of them in my life. They were short-lived. Because the Lord wouldn't let me go far, because the calling of God was so strong in my life, and I don't look back with, some people look back with regret. Oh, if only I had, like, yeah, I really wish I would have been consistent, Lord. I wonder what could have been, but here I am now. I'm obedient now. I'm serving God now. I'm being faithful, but I know that things could have been so much different. The opportunities God put in my way that I rejected, the great things that he dropped into my lap. But because I was too focused on what made me happy and what I wanted out of life, it caused me to pass up things that God was like just handing me on a silver platter. When I was in college, I was studying broadcasting. I went to Brown Institute. One of my instructors knew the chief engineer for KSTP, and they had an internship available, and I could have worked and learned from the chief engineer worked with and learned from the chief engineer of KSTP. He would have taught me, he would have worked with me, he would have helped me, right? And I would have learned so much. It would have been some great, valuable skills to have, especially in the day and age that we are now, just learning things and some of the technicalities, and with where I know our ministry is going, like when we finally get into television and radio. I thank God for what I've got and what I learned, doing videos and all of that. I mean, so much that I could have learned, but because I was so focused on having a good time, I missed my opportunity. And don't miss out on what God has for you. Stay obedient, stay consistent. What God has spoken to you, he hasn't changed his mind about. There has been times where we felt God speaking to us to do something. One particular thing was to move out to Gillette, Wyoming, and get a job out there and looking at starting some ministry. doing some ministry out there. In fact, stuff that we're currently working on getting set up right at the moment on our farm. And it caused some rift in my wife's family because we always did stuff with them. We were very close with them. And for her to just get up and move away, why, that was tough. One, it prepared my wife for the season that we entered into, getting into church ministry. Before that, I was with Teen Challenge, doing parachurch ministry. But the Lord was testing my wife to see if she would be obedient and walk away from everything. And then the Lord spoke to us very, very clearly that we were not to go. Told us in a dream a series of events that would take place, letting us know that we were not to go. And those things happened. And it was confirmed in a couple of other ways, and we ended up calling it off. And we ended up here at the church shortly after that. And we've always been focused in on where God is leading us. So again, I'm going to hammer this time and time again. Probably sound like I'm repeating myself over and over, but it's important. God hasn't changed his mind about what he's spoken to. He hasn't changed his mind about his word. He hasn't changed his mind in what he's spoken to you about what he wants you to do. It is time to be obedient. Stay consistent. Don't let somebody else, some well-meaning person, talk you out of fulfilling the call of God in your life. If I had listened to my parents, and I'm not advocating being disobedient to your parents, but I'm saying that if I had listened to them, I would not be in ministry today. If I'd listened to very well-meaning people that love me, I would not be doing what God had asked me to do. And just because you're wealthy and successful does not mean you're obedient. It doesn't. And just, nor does it mean being broken in ministry means you're obeying God either. But if I'd listened to people that cared about me and loved me, I would have completely missed on what God had for me and where he wanted me to go. I had to keep my ears tuned to him. And this is going to sound weird, but God uses all bad things for our good. In fact, it was the kind of the dysfunctional nature of my family. I had two older siblings, 5 and 6 years older than me. I got picked on a lot. I never felt as close to them as they were to each other. Always felt kind of like the third wheel. It was a big span of time between us. And then my parents divorced, and I never felt like I really ever belonged anywhere. I didn't feel like I belonged to my own family. I didn't feel like and again, that's a childhood perspective. Okay, I know that was different as an adult. I didn't feel like connected with some of my extended family and my step families. I just always felt like a third wheel or an outsider that just got drug along into this thing. And that's not the way it actually was, but that was my perspective of it. And so what happened is it was me and the Lord. It was just me not feeling like I had these family relational ties. I didn't feel like I had them. And so getting good advice and well-meaning advice, who cares what you guys think? And you never gave a rip about what I thought anyway. And again, childhood perspective. But that God has redeemed that. So I'm totally all about obeying God and serving God and being faithful to him. And not to the detriment of my family is what I'm not saying that, because a man of God cares for his family. That's your first and foremost ministry. But obedience to God over what makes everybody else happy all the time, about what they think and what, everybody's got their opinion. And so I've just learned that, the one that I care most about is Jesus. I want to be obedient to him. And, it doesn't matter what old prophet pulls me aside and wants to give me a talking to. I don't want to hear it. I know what God has said. I know where he wants me to go. I know what he wants me to do. And that's what I'm doing with my life. And that, my friend, is the attitude of a person who walks in dominion.